Welcome to Heaven Awaits. I'm Lee, and I narrate stories that change lives. From near-death experiences that offer a glimpse beyond the veil, to raw, personal testimonies of people who found God when all hope seemed lost. These are encounters with the divine, told from the heart. If these stories move you, please like, subscribe, and tap the bell. It's free, and it helps others discover the hope you found. Before we get started, I want to say something really quickly regarding this story. It always amazes me how much we can learn from our children, as Dennis found out. Anyway, grab a coffee or tea, settle in, and join me for today's powerful journey. I never believed in God. At least, that's what I told everyone, including myself. Growing up in a household where religion was treated like a quaint superstition, something your elderly relatives clung to, but educated people had outgrown, I developed an early identity as the rational one. In college, this solidified into something more concrete. I wasn't just non-religious, I was proudly skeptical. I enjoyed the intellectual sparring, dismantling arguments for God's existence with what I considered airtight logic. It became part of who I was. Dennis, the skeptic, the rational one. The guy who'd politely but firmly explain why your belief system was fundamentally flawed. My wife Melissa grew up Catholic, but had drifted away from it by the time we met. She still had a vague spirituality, mentioned God occasionally, said grace at Thanksgiving, but it wasn't central to her life. When we got married, we agreed to raise our children without religion, letting them decide for themselves when they were older. I was secretly confident they'd follow my example. After all, who chooses mythology over science when presented with both? Denise was born on a rainy Tuesday in April. 6 pounds, 6 ounces of screaming perfection. I remember looking down at her in the hospital, this tiny red-faced creature, and feeling something I'd never experienced before. A fierce, overwhelming protectiveness, mixed with a strange terror. What if I couldn't keep her safe? What if I failed her? What if the world hurt her? These weren't rational thoughts. They were primal, instinctual. "She's perfect," Melissa whispered, exhausted but radiant. "She is," I agreed, and for just a moment, I felt a strange impulse to thank someone, but I pushed it away. There was no one to thank, just biology doing its thing, the result of millions of years of evolution. That's all. Denise grew into a curious, vibrant child, always asking questions, always wondering. Why is the sky blue? Where do bugs go when it rains? What happens when we die? I answered the first two easily enough. The third one was trickier. "Well," I said carefully, "when people die, their bodies stop working, like when a toy's batteries run out, and we remember them in our hearts and minds." She frowned, considering this. "But what about the rest of them? The part that makes them laugh and cry and love?" "That's just our brains, sweetie. Very complicated brains that evolved over millions of years." She didn't look convinced, but she nodded and went back to coloring. I felt a small twinge of guilt, wondering if I should have given her a more comforting answer. But no, I wouldn't lie to my child, even if the truth was hard. When Denise was 4, Melissa's mother came to live with us. Grandma Elaine had been diagnosed with heart failure, and we wanted her final months to be comfortable, surrounded by family. She was deeply religious, the kind who read her Bible every morning and said grace before every meal, even if it was just a cup of tea. I respected Elaine, despite our differences. She never tried to convert me or criticized my atheism, simply lived her faith quietly, with a dignity I admired, even as I pitied what I considered her delusion. She and Denise quickly formed a bond. I'd often find them sitting together on the porch swing, Elaine telling stories or teaching Denise to knit. Sometimes I'd overhear bits of conversation. "Does God live in heaven, Grandma?" "Yes, dear, but he also lives in our hearts." "Even Daddy's heart?" "Especially your daddy's heart, though he might not know it yet." I'd roll my eyes, but let it go. What harm could it do? Elaine was elderly and ill, If this brought her comfort in her final days, so be it. I could always explain reality to Denise later. One evening, as I tucked Denise into bed, she asked if we could talk to God. "You mean pray?" I asked, surprised. She nodded. "Grandma showed me how. Can we? Please?" I hesitated. On one hand, I didn't want to encourage superstition. On the other, I didn't want to upset her or make her feel foolish. "Sure," I said finally. "You go ahead." She beamed, folded her tiny hands, and closed her eyes. "Dear God, thank you for Mommy and Grandma, and my Teddy, and the stars, and the trees, and the grass, and..." She continued, listing everything she could think of, from ice cream to her preschool teacher. I sat there, feeling a mix of amusement and discomfort. Then she said something that made my heart stop. "And thank you most of all for Daddy's heart, even though he doesn't know you're there yet. Amen." She opened her eyes, smiling like she'd just shared the most natural thing in the world. I sat there, speechless. "Why?" I cleared my throat. "Why did you thank God for my heart, sweetie?" "Because," she said, her eyes wide and serious, "God lives in your heart, even if you don't know it yet. That's what Grandma says." I forced a laugh. "Well, Grandma is entitled to her opinions, but..." "It's not opinion, Daddy. It's true. I can tell." I kissed her forehead. "Time for sleep, little philosopher." As I turned off her light and closed her door, I shook my head, amused at how children parrot things adults say without understanding them. But her words stayed with me. God lives in your heart, even if you don't know it yet. I tried to dismiss it. Just a child repeating her grandmother's religious platitudes. Nothing to dwell on. But that sentence kept echoing in my mind over the next few days. When I was driving to work, in the middle of meetings, while brushing my teeth, it would just pop into my head in Denise's earnest little voice. God lives in your heart, even if you don't know it yet. The more I tried to ignore it, the more persistent it became, like an annoying song you can't get out of your head. Except this wasn't just annoying, it was unsettling, as if those simple words had found a crack in my armor, a vulnerability I didn't know existed. A week later, I was sitting in a coffee shop, working on my laptop, when an elderly man at the next table collapsed. Heart attack, as we'd later learn. I found myself on the floor beside him, dialing 911, then following the dispatcher's instructions for CPR. I'd never done it before, only seen it in movies, but somehow my hands knew what to do. Compressions, counting, don't stop, don't give up. By the time the paramedics arrived, the man was breathing again. As they loaded him onto the stretcher, he grabbed my hand. "Thank you," he whispered. "God bless you." I nodded, uncomfortable with the blessing, but moved by his gratitude. As I watched the ambulance drive away, I realized my hands were shaking. Not just from adrenaline, but from something else. A sense that I'd been part of something significant. Not just saving a life, but connecting with another human being in a profound way. That night, I lay awake, replaying the incident. The man's face, the feeling of his ribs beneath my hands, the moment he took that first gasping breath, and then, out of nowhere, Denise's words again. God lives in your heart, even if you don't know it yet. And for the first time, I didn't immediately dismiss them. 2 weeks later, Grandma Elaine took a turn for the worse. Her heart was failing rapidly. The doctors said it was a matter of days, maybe hours. We set up a hospital bed in our guest room. Melissa and I took turns sitting with her, making sure she was comfortable. Denise would come in for short visits, bringing drawings or flowers from our garden. One evening, as I sat beside Elaine while she slept, I found myself studying her face. The lines around her eyes from years of smiling, the peaceful expression despite the pain I knew she was in. Her Bible lay on the nightstand, well worn, pages marked with colored tabs and handwritten notes. On impulse, I picked it up. It fell open to a page that had been bookmarked with a photo. Elaine and Denise on the porch swing, both laughing. Someone, Melissa probably, had caught them in a moment of pure joy. I felt a lump in my throat. The page it had opened to was marked with a highlighter. Psalm 46:10. Be still and know that I am God. Simple words, nothing fancy or theological, just a quiet command to stop, listen, be. I found myself doing just that, being still. The house was quiet, except for Elaine's labored breathing and the distant sound of Melissa and Denise in the kitchen, making dinner. I closed my eyes, and in that stillness, something shifted. Not dramatically, not like a lightning bolt or a voice from heaven, more like a door opening slightly, letting in a thin beam of light. A possibility I hadn't allowed before. What if? What if there was something more? What if the universe wasn't just random chance and cold equations? What if the love I felt for Denise, for Melissa, for Elaine in her final days? What if that came from somewhere, someone? I quickly closed the Bible and set it down, uncomfortable with where my thoughts were heading. This was grief talking, or fatigue, or both. I was a rational person. I didn't believe in supernatural beings or religious fairy tales, but Denise's words, once again, God lives in your heart, even if you don't know it yet. Elaine died 3 days later, peacefully, with Melissa holding her hand. I was in the room too, standing at the foot of the bed. As she took her last breath, I felt a strange peace fill the room, not the absence of grief. We were all crying, but a sense that something sacred had happened, that we had witnessed a passage, a transition. At the funeral, I found myself listening to the priest's words with new ears, not dismissing them outright, but considering them, letting them in. The reading spoke of hope, of resurrection, of a love stronger than death. I couldn't say I believed them, exactly, but for the first time, I didn't immediately reject them either. Afterward, as people shared memories of Elaine at the reception, I stood off to the side, watching Denise. She was wearing a black dress Melissa had bought for the occasion, her hair in 2 neat braids. She looked solemn, but not afraid. An elderly woman, one of Elaine's church friends, bent down to speak to her. Your grandma is in heaven now, sweetheart. She's with God. Denise nodded thoughtfully. I know, but she's also here. She pointed to her chest. In our hearts. Like God. The woman smiled, patting Denise's cheek before moving on. Denise spotted me watching and came over, taking my hand. Are you sad, Daddy? I knelt down to her level. Yes, I am. I'm going to miss Grandma a lot. Me too. She tilted her head, studying me. But you know what? Grandma told me something before she got really sick. What's that? She said sometimes God puts special people in our lives to help us find Him, and that I was one of your special people. She smiled, revealing the gap where she'd lost her first tooth. Isn't that silly? You already know where everything is. I felt my throat tighten. Not everything, sweetie. Not everything. That night, after Denise was asleep, I found myself sitting on our back porch, looking up at the stars. The same stars I'd always explained in terms of nuclear fusion and light years and the vastness of space. They were still all those things, but somehow they seemed different now, as if they were not just burning balls of gas, but symbols, messages, a language I was just beginning to learn. Couldn't sleep either? Melissa asked, stepping outside and sitting beside me. She handed me a cup of tea. Just thinking, I said. About Mom? Partly. I hesitated. And about something Denise said. Melissa smiled. Our little mystic. What was it this time? I told her about Denise's prayer, about the way those words had lodged in my mind, about the strange openness I'd been feeling since Elaine died. I don't know what's happening to me, I admitted. I've always been so sure, so certain there was nothing beyond what we can see and measure. But lately, I've been wondering if I've been missing something. Melissa took my hand. You know, when we agreed to raise Denise without religion, I went along with it because it seemed rational. But part of me always hoped she'd find her own way to faith, and maybe lead us there too. I looked at her surprised. You never said that. You were so adamant about your atheism. It was such a core part of your identity. I didn't want to challenge that. But now? She squeezed my hand. Now I think maybe our daughter is wiser than both of us. The next Sunday, I found myself doing something I'd sworn I'd never do. Driving to a church. Not Elaine's traditional Catholic parish, but a small community church Melissa had heard about from a coworker. They're more about questions than answers, she'd said. You might like it. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Answers, comfort, community. All I knew was that something had started in me that I couldn't ignore. A crack in the wall of my certainty. A whisper that maybe, just maybe, there was more to reality than what I could see and touch and prove. We sat in the back row, Denise between us, coloring quietly in a book the greeter had given her. The service was simple, music that wasn't flashy, but felt sincere. A sermon about doubt being part of faith, not its opposite. A moment of silence, where everyone was invited to just be still. I didn't have a dramatic conversion, no lightning bolt moment, no sudden certainty replacing my lifelong skepticism. But as we drove home afterward, Denise chattering happily in the back seat about the other children she'd met, I realized something had changed. I was open in a way I hadn't been before, willing to consider, to listen, to wonder. That night, as I tucked Denise in, she asked if we could pray again. Sure, I said, and meant it. She folded her hands and closed her eyes. Dear God, thank you for Mommy and Daddy, and for taking care of Grandma in heaven, and thank you for helping Daddy find you in his heart. Amen. She opened her eyes and smiled at me, completely confident in what she'd just said. What makes you think I've found God in my heart? I asked, curious rather than defensive. She touched my chest, right over my heart. You look different, lighter, like you found something you lost. Out of the mouths of babes, as they say. It's been 4 years since that night. I still have lots of questions, so many questions. Some days I wake up full of doubt, wondering if I've just created a comforting illusion for myself. Other days, I feel a connection to something beyond me that's so real, it takes my breath away. I still refuse to call myself a Christian, though I've been reading the Bible and asking endless questions. I'm somewhere in between. Not the staunch atheist I was, but not quite a believer either. On a journey, I suppose. But every night, I sit beside Denise's bed, and we pray together. And every night, I'm amazed at how naturally it comes to her, this conversation with a God she's never doubted. Her simple faith challenges me, not because it's naive, but because it's so clear-eyed, so free of the intellectual barriers I've built over the years. God lives in your heart, even if you don't know it yet. Those words changed me. They created a space for possibility where there had been only certainty. They allowed me to consider what my rational mind had always rejected, that there might be truths beyond what I can prove, realities beyond what I can measure. I don't know where this journey will lead, but I know this. My daughter's innocent question revealed something I'd been missing all along. Not answers, but a willingness to ask the questions that really matter. Not certainty, but the courage to live with mystery. Not proof, but the possibility of faith. I'm not going to lie, I was smiling from ear to ear when I was reading this story. There are so many in my email with similar stories that I may never get to read them all. It reminded me that if we all had the faith of a child, just how much better would the world be?